Getting older can really drain your energy, and that's because the aging process really begins at the mitochondrial level. Now, with each year that we get older, our mitochondria experience a decline in function, leading to reduced energy production, an increased buildup of reactive oxygen species, and impaired mitochondrial quality. Now, keep in mind that our mitochondria have their own DNA, and here mutations can accumulate with age, and those can damage cellular components like proteins, lipids, and our own DNA, which then contributes to aging and age-related diseases. Now, this process can also turn on genes to accelerate the aging process even further. Mitophagy, so the process of removing damaged mitochondria, as well as mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the process of creating new mitochondria, also decline with age. And this leads to an accumulation of dysfunctional mitochondria and a lack of healthy ones. Now, aside from skin and tissue aging, these effects of mitochondrial dysfunction are linked to various age-related diseases, including cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease, cancer, diabetes, and inflammatory disorders. So aside from diet and exercise, what can we do to slow or actually reverse this cellular aging process? Well, it turns out that there are molecules that can greatly improve mitochondrial function and energy production, as well as increase the actual number of mitochondria that we have to the levels that we had in our younger years. Now, the company Health Thru Nutrition, HTN, has specialized in high-quality products to support mitochondrial function and mitochondrial biogenesis. So again, the process of creating more mitochondria. And in this video, I'm talking to their CEO, Marko Rosa, about this topic. Good morning, Marko.
Good morning, Jonas. How are you?
Great seeing you today. So a lot of questions. And again, I found your company because I was very interested in how to improve mitochondrial health. I did a lot of videos on this topic. How can we make our mitochondria healthier? And then even I found out, as I'm researching this a bit more, that there's actually even ways that we can increase mitochondrial numbers, which is probably extremely important for overall health. But can you tell me briefly how your company, Health Thru Nutrition, became involved really in the interest in improving mitochondrial health?
Well, our involvement came many years ago through CoQ10, through coenzyme Q10, by having a specialty coenzyme Q10 more bioavailable, and our involvement with United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, and that helps mainly children that have mitochondrial disease, and complex ones was the CoQ10 deficiency. So back in those days, we did some studies, and we even actually had a study going on with ubiquinol that showed that it really benefited those patients, and it helped them, of course, generate more energy and feel better.
Okay, very interesting. So ubiquinol was one of the first ones that you guys were involved in then in terms of supplements?
Yes, coenzyme Q10 and ubiquinol, and then later on, many years later, we found interest in the PQQ, pyrroloquinol quinone,
Right.
which is also a coenzyme-like substance and works synergistically with coenzyme Q10. But unlike coenzyme Q10, it actually has an ability to, besides protecting the mitochondria, but it also promotes the biogenesis of the new mitochondria, which we haven't seen in any other dietary supplement thus far.
And this was very interesting to me, exactly because one thing is, improving the health of our existing mitochondria. But as I mentioned earlier already, that, as we get older, the mitochondria, one is they're less efficient, so they make less energy, so they're not really at their peak performance. But the other thing is that our numbers of mitochondria in our cells decrease. And explain to me a little bit the results that you guys have seen with PQQ. And let me just try to mispronounce that for a second. Pyrroloquinolin quinone, I believe, right? That's the you say it out loud.
I generally say pyrroloquinolin quinone.
Okay.
But we both have accents, I suppose. And so we all each say it in our own different ways.
Right.
Well, I mean, there are numerous studies of PQQ, and there's one in particular, actually, which we didn't do ourselves, but actually that it shows how pyrroloquinolin quinone increases the number of the mitochondria. But one of the studies we did was entirely different from this. We did it on a Cellular that was done here in the United States, and it's a product combination of PQQ with CoQ10 and several other ingredients. And what we found that after 30 days, this product, and this was, mind you, this was done on patients that have a peripheral vascular disease or poor circulation. What we found was that after 30 days of taking it, when patients did a 6 minutes walking test, which is your standard stress test, in terms of energy, we found that patients on Cellular products versus the placebo traveled 46% greater distance, which within the same amount of time, which is incredible in comparison to the placebo. And we also did find that it actually helped them with the blood pressure and circulation as well. And also on a standard function form, patients reported more energy and better overall physical and cognitive function as well. So we do know that PQQ has an ability, alongside with the CoQ10, which creates great synergy to help with energy, cellular energy.
This is actually pretty fascinating. So then here we can see the direct correlation of how important our mitochondria are actually for day-to-day function. And I think it's really, we have to understand, I mean, we always thought about this primitive model of it's just the engine in our cells that makes energy, that's all it does. But the importance of it, everything is linked to this energy. Without this energy, we can't live. And I came across this, I talk about methylene blue a lot, which is, you know, in high doses actually not a good idea. In small doses, actually, it works very well and supports the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. But there's a condition we use it for in the emergency room, which is cyanide poisoning, right? And cyanide poisoning affects the complex 4 in this respiratory chain. And if you think about this, this is really hindering ultimately that any energy can be produced. And here methylene blue bridges that. But what is, you know, the consequence of blocking this small part in the mitochondria? It's people die within minutes, you know, they're dead. Because when we cannot produce energy, we cannot live. And what you just showed in or told me in this study, essentially that it is also tremendously linked when we can improve energy output, that we move better, that we are more mobile, that we get more things done, and you know, that we can function a lot better. And that's, I think, of course, fantastic. Now, what was the age population that we're talking about?
Oh, I'm not familiar with the age population was. I would say it was, I would say somewhere must have been 50s, 60s and above, generally patients that have a reduced blood flow.
Right. Okay. Yeah, really interesting. So, and again, I like these direct applications, as you can see. And so when you guys, so your first product was what exactly? What was the first product that you guys started? Hey, we need to have a supplement to support this. What was the first product you guys marketed then?
Well, first product we marketed many years ago was the coenzyme Q10.
Right.
We had several different forms, and because CoQ10 is a fat-soluble substance, it's very poorly absorbed. Over the years, we have developed different delivery methods that increase the absorption from initially 3 times with a Q-gel patent, and then later we moved into liquids like you saw products. That's all done through our Epic for Health website. And then ultimately we created a product called H2Q, which has 8 times the absorption over the standard fat-soluble CoQ10, because as we were working with primarily back in the day with patients with mitochondrial conditions, complex 1 condition is a CoQ10 deficiency, which is another factor in aging, as we talked about. Because as we age, we don't only produce less mitochondria, we also produce a lot less CoQ10 as well. So those two cofactors go together, and our healthy mitochondria are dependent on the level of CoQ10 we have as well. So CoQ10 was definitely the first product that we developed, and that's what sparked our interest and in mitochondria itself.
Yeah, this is interesting. So CoQ10, and this is one thing that I always considered as well, and it's a great point you brought up. One is absorption is a problem. It's a fairly large molecule, as I understand it.
Large.
Now, and here is something that I want to talk about a bit later again, but I want to dive into this a bit now since you brought it up, is there's a lot of supplements out there, right? And you can buy, 100 or more different versions of CoQ10 on Amazon, probably a lot more than that.
Yes.
And on the bottle, it'll always say this and this many milligrams or whatever else. But I think one thing to understand is well, not only is actually the amount of this particular product in there as it's advertised, because there's no regulation as far as I understand it. And the second thing is what you take, does it actually get absorbed? And there's huge differences the way I understand. Maybe you can explain a bit, because you looked at what's out there from the competition. And I know that you guys, and this is one thing, I researched you guys before I started using your supplements as well, because I know you guys are very thorough. You do research, you do testing, not only what's in your preparations, but also that the stuff gets taken up. Maybe you can explain a bit of how not every CoQ10 out there is the same.
No, not every is. There are a lot of CoQ10 products. There are a lot of great products, solid products out there. There are basically 2 primary forms in a CoQ10. There's a ubiquinone, which it exists in the oxidized form, and your body converts it in ubiquinol. And there's ubiquinol, which is primarily produced by Kaneka, and we also work with ubiquinol as well. I think we have the largest offering of ubiquinol products out there, because I believe we were one of the earliest one, if not the very first, to manufacture this product. So there are a lot of different products out there in the CoQ10 space. Some are just plain CoQ10, some are fortified with the BioPerine that does provide certain level of the absorption, and then there are other different ones. And of course, we have one in the ubiquinol space that goes as much as the 8 times the absorption. And of course, in the ubiquinol space, which is just generally and naturally more bioavailable over the standard ubiquinol as well, because it's already converted, so your body doesn't have to go through that extra step of converting, especially as we get older. Our body's ability to convert ubiquinol to ubiquinol also diminishes, so it's also readily available. And we have some, even in ubiquinols, we have a solubilized ubiquinol as well that increases the bioavailability too.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. And so this again, this CoQ10 is one of the major factors, of course, for mitochondrial health. And then what I'm very interested in, your company then further on became involved in PQQ, right, in terms of mitochondrial numbers. And how did that whole thing come about, that you said, hey, this is another compound that, I think it's only really present in very small amount, naturally occurring, like in kiwi fruit and a few other nutrients, but in very tiny amounts. And at some point it was found, hey, if we can have somewhat large amounts of this, it really helps to increase numbers again in mitochondria. So this is called mitochondrial biogenesis, right? Yes. And again, here, this is very interesting with PQQ. So from what I briefly read about it is that it can increase the expression of this PGC1 alpha, which is a regulator of mitochondrial function. Correct. And it kind of really increases the numbers. And again, we got to keep in mind, and I said this before, that mitochondria are really sort of their own cells within our cells. They have their own DNA. Yes. And they are really involved in many mechanisms in our cellular health, not just in energy production, even cell division, in many other things. They are involved in apoptosis, which is hugely important, obviously. It's a mechanism we need to weed out bad cells, for example. And so they have a very, very a wide range of actions in our cells that are hugely important to sustain life and to function optimally. But again, so when we can increase those numbers, so PQQ seem to crystallize out as one of these factors, in my opinion, the only real supplement that has been directly linked to increasing the numbers of mitochondria. Maybe you can explain a bit better on how you guys became involved in this and what that resulted in terms of your products ultimately.
Well, yes, of course, because as you said, the keyword here is always mitochondria. It's the one common denominator that always sparks an interest when we look at any new product, and especially when it comes to from a relationship supplier that we were already working with. So when this came about, we were excited, and we were more than happy to look at, consider, and be one of the first ones to launch the product in it, and then later ones be the first ones to launch 40 milligrams product as well, and incorporate it into what's today quite a few of our products. So I want to say right now we have one of the largest offerings of the PQQ products as a result of this. As you said, generating new mitochondria, generally it's done through exercise or through hypoxia. There's just no other pathway in your body to generate a new mitochondria. So to see something interesting like this was incredible for us. So we definitely took interest immediately. And ever since, it's been a great relationship for us and great addition to our products and our company.
Amazing. Yeah, that's the thing. And for me, again, this was fascinating to understand this a bit better, that we can actually directly directly stimulate increased production of this mitochondria. And again, keeping in mind, they have their own DNA, they divide, and there's a certain, we have to have a level of health in our mitochondria to make the sufficient amount of energy, but also a sufficient amount of numbers, especially when it comes to the brain, the neurons. I mean, that's one of the tissues that has a lot of these. And so when we can increase numbers again, I think in terms of disease prevention, ultimately, when we think of brain health, we think of neurocognitive problems like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease. Having healthy mitochondria and having healthy mitochondrial production and healthy mitochondrial numbers is hugely important, obviously. Yes. So When you guys are, again, designing your products, and again, I mentioned this earlier a bit, there's a certain process where you want to make sure, first of all, that when you advertise, hey, this is the amount of supplement we give you, that's actually in there. But also there's beyond that, there's quality control that you guys do that I think is different than what many other products out there are probably doing. Now, there's some others that are great, of course, as well.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
But there's also many products out there where what's on the bottle doesn't really reflect, first of all, what's inside, but then also the formulation of it might not be very beneficial to you. And then there's also the risk of having contaminants in there, which when you get supplements, and again, it's so confusing when you go on Amazon and you're like, oh, which supplement do I take? You shouldn't always go by the prettiest, brightest label, because you should really look at what's behind it. So can you tell me a little bit for your company, for HTN, Health Thru Nutrition, what your process is in terms of your quality control and how you make sure that what's on the label is in there and that you actually have good absorption of your supplements?
Yeah, so we're always concerned with efficacy, of course, but before we even consider efficacy, safety is number one concern for us. So our ethos is safety first, and of course that only comes from quality. So when you look at it from a perspective of how we manufacture products and the flow of testing and the number of testing, it starts with, of course, with procuring ingredients from a high quality suppliers, making sure that we have adequate amounts and that we always have overage in our products. And when I say overage, means that we are always putting more than 100% of the label claim. And of course, you need to be able to know how to test for that label claim as well. You're testing just for, in the case of PQQ, are you testing PQQ pure or pyranolquinone quinone? In our case, we're testing PQQ pure, so there's actually even furthermore amount in our products. And so then every incoming raw material that comes into the facility, which is of course certified GMP by NSF and NPA, we identify every incoming ingredient, we test it for potency. In other words, if it's 90% we claims to be vitamin C, it has to be at least 90% vitamin C. We test for contaminants, such as microcontaminants, E. coli, salmonella, mold, etc. And we also test for heavy metals. In the event that it's fish oil, we'll go a step further and check the peroxide value to make sure that it's not rancid in any way, that has been sitting around for a long time. Batches in process, also we validate the blend to make sure that it's equally blended, because that's also important for safety. You have those micronutrients such as vitamin K2s or B vitamins that are in such a minute amount, so they have to be evenly dispersed throughout the batch. So you don't have one pill with 150 micrograms and the other ones with the 10 micrograms of one of those ingredients, which can make a big difference in both safety and efficacy. And of course, once the product is manufactured and packaged, we test all over that again for label claim to ensure that the right amount of nutrients is in every capsule. But also, most importantly, we test for safety once more to ensure that there is no contamination throughout our process as well. So we will test the micro-testing again, E. coli, salmonella, mold, bacteria, etc. And we also test for heavy metals again once more. But we also go another step further, and we usually test our finished product at the third-party lab to verify label claim as well, because a lot of our consumers want to see that now as well. So every batch is also tested at the third-party lab. And what we do is we also do stability testing, because we use adequate overages to ensure we test our products after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or whatever it takes to extend the shelf life. So if we're putting 3 years shelf life on our product, that means that our product was made 3 years ago. We have put it into stability chamber. We have monitored it, tested it every 6 months, and determined that after 3 years, our product is still stable. In other words, that it still meets minimum 100% of the label claim, that it's still safe to consume, that micro hasn't risen, that it still has no E. coli, salmonella, and micro levels are low, and heavy metals are tested as well. And only then do we assign a 3-year shelf life to our products.
Yeah, that's interesting. And a lot of these steps are not required necessarily. You guys are doing this because you want to have a quality product. And so I think that's the one thing that I always recommend to people. You have to find a company that does these extra steps to have this quality in their product, because it's not always required. And we always think, oh, the FDA is going to check everything, but that's not exactly true. They usually only get alerted if there's a problem, if somebody complains or something happens, right? And I think this is something that people need to realize. And I got a lot of criticism because I talked about fish oil supplements. And again, I like fish oil supplements in general. I like omega-3 is very helpful. But your company is doing it right, where you're testing for it, right? Where you're testing for oxidation. And the truth is, and there's a lot of articles showing that a lot of companies don't. And when they test them, about over 55-60% may have levels of oxidative products in there that are not good, because then, of course, when there's oxidation of the oil, it becomes counterproductive to use it, because they become more harmful than useful. And but again, this third-party testing, all these things, I think that's hugely important. And I had to learn this as well, because I'm ordering supplements. I use a lot of supplements, and I needed to sort of understand how do I gauge this? How do I find actually something from a reputable company again? And that's one of the things why I was excited talking to you, even in earlier conversations we had, trying to understand your process a bit better. And again, it's like something where you guys spend a lot of money going a bit beyond what you're required, right? The consumer doesn't know that in the end, because you're looking on there, you look on Amazon, you see only these pretty labels out there. And you don't know that unless you kind of investigate a bit of how the company is run. So I think that's very good information that you're providing there.
And unfortunately, a lot of consumers don't go to the same lengths that you do, or possibly even understand as much as you do in terms of the, not just efficacy, but also quality and these testings and additional steps that we take.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And that's kind of the important stuff with all of this, right? Because you want to make sure that one, what's on the label is in your product, and then secondly, that it actually is in a formula that actually works, that you have high absorption, and that it does what it's supposed to do without adding in, contaminants and, as you mentioned, heavy metals or pathogens that you have to screen for. You have to make sure when supplies come in at you that you screen for all those things, obviously, right?
Indeed.
Now, in terms of like mitochondrial improvement, do you see any other products coming out in the future, or combinations of things that might be on the forefront? Because more and more, and I mean, at least in my understanding, we are understanding more and more how important our mitochondria are, how they are at the root of many diseases if they're not working well, if they're malfunctioning. And there's differences, I talk in other videos about this, between a healthy cell and a cancer cell, for example, where the cancer cell does not go through this elaborate citric acid cycle. You have mitochondria that are highly dysfunctional. They can only ferment. One reason why cancer cells guzzle up a lot of glucose, because they can't really elaborately use glucose via the citric acid cycle for ATP production. But beyond that, so the distinction of having a cell that is very healthy and a cell that's very diseased a lot of times comes back to mitochondrial function. Are there products that you see coming out that support this more, that are more along the lines of improving mitochondrial function beyond what's already out there?
I mean, there are products that are coming out, in addition to, PQQ, CoQ10, NR. We've seen NMN. We've seen, of course, the rise and unfortunate demise of the NMN as it is in present state. We've seen NR, but we're also now seeing with spermidine, and we've even formulated a product with L-ergotenine, also known as EGT, for cellular wellness as well. There's Shilajit. There's been products and other products that kind of help your body, I want to say, to either go through a autophagy, where it does for cellular cleaning. So it's been products like that as well, and I'm sure there will be more and more products coming in to support mitochondria, because I mean, it's not just the lifespan that we're looking at, but we need to improve the health span. And healthy mitochondria definitely has, I think, the biggest impact in our health span, overall how we feel, and our overall wellness as we age, more than anything else.
Yeah, and one of the products I know that you're using, NR, which is nicotinamide riboside.
Yes.
In combination with PQQ.
Yes.
And it's a very interesting one, because so NR, nicotinamide riboside, is a precursor to NAD.
Correct.
And NAD is another one of those molecules that in the mitochondria, as we get older, we have less of it, and it is difficult to get in. I mean, it does to some extent, I believe, if you give NAD directly, but it's a large molecule, and the absorption is difficult. Some gets in, but the precursor seems to work a bit better for most people, where either NR or NMN, which is nicotinamide mononucleotide, right? These are two slightly different, from different angles, pathway that ultimately end up to make more NAD+. Which again, NAD+, very important. And again, this is hopefully not too technical, but this is all part ultimately of the respiratory chain in the mitochondria that is involved in, transporting these electrons using this proton pump to make more ATP ultimately.
Yes.
And if these components don't work well, if we don't have enough of these raw materials, if we don't have enough NAD, then there are issues. So in my clinic, what we do, we give NAD plus by injection,
yes,
bypassing the oral route, but it's very expensive. And one thing I've noticed is, I mean, we buy it, it's a subcutaneous injection. You can also give it intravenously, but it's very expensive to have that finished product. So NR and PQQ. So the PQQ more in mitochondrial biogenesis, so making more mitochondria, and then the NR being a precursor for NAD, helping with mitochondrial efficiency, mitochondrial health. That combination is something that you guys have in one of your products, and I know that that's something that's very popular. So in terms of have you seen in terms of feedback from clients' results or studies when this was combined, have you seen data that was very encouraging with this
we
one?
really haven't done any studies on this product thus far, but we've seen there are many studies on NR being a precursor to NAD, so we know it works. As you mentioned, NAD, if you take it orally by itself, your body breaks it down and you get a very little benefit from it, which is the reason why you're administering by the injection or IV,
right?
Whichever way has to, you're bypassing the whole system, so it works much better. But yes, ultimately they work from a different two pathways. One is NAD booster, and the other one is help with mitochondrial health to ultimately help the overall mitochondrial wellness.
Right. Yeah, and as you mentioned, some other ways in order to help us make more mitochondria healthy. Of course, exercise always important. We do cryotherapy in my clinic. These are all things that can be very helpful, like a little shock to the system that then also can be helpful here. But you have to have the raw materials as well. I think that's the important part that's missing a lot of times.
Yes.
And then dietary wise, I think it's difficult to get these precursors from diet. I think here supplements are very much superior. Again, you can always optimize your diet, and the less junk food you eat, the more whole foods you're consuming. I think there's definitely a huge advantage to get more of these nutrients in. But I think supplements, as we get older, to me become more and more essential. When I was younger, I think even if my diet wasn't very good, I was doing okay. Now that I get older, I can definitely tell the difference. But also, I'm more sensitive to supplements. So I can feel if something's working or not for me. Yeah. And in the case of methylene blue that I talk a lot about, I take a very small amount of that. And that's actually important to notice as well, because if you take too much, you can actually disrupt electron transport. It can be a pro-oxidant. There can be issues with that. But I do take, again, the PQQ, and I thought the research was very interesting. I saw that really in terms of neuroprotection and cognitive functions even has a lot of roles there. And there was research in that. My concern is really keeping brain function, having hopefully doing a lot of things to prevent Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease developing. And PQQ seems to be very important there as well. It has a protective function amongst with other things. Methylene blue in small amounts can as well. And I think these are things that I like from that perspective. Besides having this increased overall energy, being able to use a bit more of the mitochondrial output. And as you mentioned in that study you talked about initially, that's something we can feel directly. If our mitochondria work better, we feel better. I mean, there's a huge difference in this. And I think that's something where supplements play a huge role. So besides the, we talked about, you have a fish oil product as well along the same lines. What other products do you guys make that help basically with overall health, not necessarily mitochondrial health?
I mean, we have a lot of products. I mean, that we talked about. One of the fish oil is our product called Freedom Complex, which was studied at the UCLA on primarily markers of inflammation, endothelial function, and improve the omega-3 index because the presence and the type of omega-3 that we don't only test for the omegas in rancidity, etc. We're also using the omega-3 that's basically Friends of Disease certified. So we're concerned about sustainability of our earth and oceans and the mammals. So this product was studied at the UCLA Harvard Medical and was published in a Journal of Clinical Nutrition. We had great results on interleukin-6, C-reactive protein, and even had a really positive impact on the systolic blood pressure. In addition to those, another Mito product is called a Mitotonic, which is designed for exercise. That contains the D-ribose, PQQ, and other ingredients there as well. We started targeting recently skin, which is our largest organ, and this is a product that has that molecular tripeptide with EGT L-arginine. That's the ingredients we touched recently about, the newer mitochondrial ingredient that's coming out, that's becoming more and more popular.
Can you talk a bit about that? You sent that to me, the skin new, and it was very interesting for me. And this is really very much geared towards healthy skin, right? In terms of wrinkles and all those things.
Yes.
Can you explain a bit of the ingredients in that product?
Yes. So this product has there are two skin new products. One is a skin new probiotic with a prebiotic that was manufactured by HY, one of South Korea's largest probiotic manufacturers. And they've done studies where that probiotic helps with the gut health. So it's basically treating the gut-skin axis by supporting the gut, because it's, as they always say, you are what you eat, and how it gets absorbed and toxins and everything else. So that product helps your gut and helps with the permeability, reduction of toxins, etc. And it just helps collagen kind of hold it together, keep it together. This product, Skin New, that contains collagen with EGT, it has a clinically studied collagen at just one gram, which is just 2 capsules of this product. Generally, when you consume collagen, you have to take a scoop or 2 or 3 because it doesn't contain enough tripeptides. This product has a 15% tripeptides, in other words, 150 milligrams of the very small Dalton's tripeptides. And it's been shown in a 12-week study to help with the collagen production, with elasticity, and hydration of the skin. And of course, because it's skin, when you think of skin, it's not just our largest organ and one that protects us, but we also skin is the place where you see most of the aging and changes in our bodies as we move along through the age. We also added a little bit of EGT to provide skin with additional cellular health, aside from the collagen tripeptide.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fantastic. Because I think this is very interesting as you bring up the connection to the gut health.
Yes.
How that, again, there are many things that our gut health influences, but including skin, and people don't really think about that easily. But that's actually a very good one, and you can tell when people's microbiome is disturbed, that there's also skin changes, and yes, the aging process is accelerated. And one thing that's when I mentioned earlier that I think I need more supplements now than I used to, but it's normal as we get older, our capability to absorb in the digestive tract goes down as well, it decreases. And we see a lot of deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies, even people that do take multivitamins, and elderly people, if they're in the 80s or 90s, a lot of times there's a B12 deficiency. And part of that is just pure absorption issues that people have as they get older. So as we can improve the gut microbiome, and we're destroying it on a daily basis by eating the standard American diet, pretty much. We are consuming all these things. We're overdoing antibiotics. We're overdoing a lot of these chemicals that are ultimately detrimental to the gut microbiome, including artificial sweeteners and food colors. All these things are not good. And then, of course, this accelerates the aging process, as there is a direct correlation to our skin. And I think this was very interesting for me, because you sent this to me, and I actually have used these, and I'm going to continue to use them, because I think that's actually a very potent antidote, so to speak, to this sort of deterioration that we can influence, at least, right? There's many things we can't, but I think in terms of that access, we can do a lot. And that can be quite profound. So it's very interesting for me. And you did the study was very interesting, that you actually guys studied this and saw great results with that one. So that's a very exciting one. Because again, this goes more in, if you want, ultimately the cosmetic realm, but it's an overall health realm. Yes. Because if your gut is working well, it's not just that your skin will look better, but it's also helping you, neurocognitively wise. It helps you with your decrease your risk of certain cancers. Your gut health is hugely important for the rest of your body, obviously. Yeah, and we're learning that more and more as well, because again, we keep messing these things up because of our diet and behavior and things we do wrong on a daily basis. So we can compensate for that. I think that's fantastic.
Yes.
No, this is fascinating. So now, again, very, very interesting. Again, my point to this video today was as well to highlight, hey, listen, if these are, you guys are a very good example of a company that goes through the extra steps to make sure that the ingredients that you promote are actually in there, and that you're doing all this quality control, and also that the ingredients are available in a form that you will absorb. Because if these things are not given, then you can spend a lot of money on supplements that don't do anything for you, or might actually cause harm to you. And I think that's an important distinction. It is difficult because the regulations are not as strict as people always think they are. And you have to have companies that have their own motivation to go the extra mile to get a good supplement out there. But that's not always rewarded because, again, you can have companies with great advertising and very pretty labels, but they might not be in there what you expect it to be. They might not help you. And then the problem is also, once people try a supplement and they don't feel much from it, they're saying, oh, this didn't work for me. Then the question is, did you actually really have in there the ingredients that you thought you're consuming? And many times it's not. So I think it's a very important point to make.
But yes,
again, and I had a lot of, go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of cases you can, we're taking supplements as a preventative. We can't always feel the difference. In
Right.
comes to, like, you take magnesiums, you take calciums for your bones, and other ingredients, and most importantly, if you're healthy, there's less likely chance that you will feel that difference. It's usually when you have a deficiency, when you have some kind of a problem, that you really truly notice the difference.
I think that's an important point. So exactly, because preventive health is not always exciting because like you said, if you feel well. But the other thing is, if continuing to be in good health is actually a great goal. Of course, if you have someone who is in poor health and they can improve through supplements, great, and changes in lifestyle, it always goes together. Change your diet, change certain things you're doing, exercise more, and take the correct supplements that might really help you a lot, things that you're deficient in. But for a healthy person, again, having the goal of keeping, cognitively sharp, of being productive, of having energy, of not falling into, also we're talking about mood disorders.
Yes.
The gut or the microbiome is also hugely important in how we feel in terms of our mood, and a lot of depressive disorders and other things are very much linked to gut health as well.
It is.
So
I believe that 90% of the serotonin, which is the happy hormone, is made in the gut as well.
Oh, wow.
So there's a very huge connection between the two.
So not just the brain.
Yes.
Yeah, that's, again, we don't understand a lot about that yet, but this access is very important. And if we can improve that, I think that's fantastic. But it was also, of course, involved in how we absorb things. And it's very important that we keep proper gut health and that we really optimize our nutrition, not just in the macronutrients we're consuming, but in having a smart selection of certain supplements that might help us along the way. And I think that's important to highlight. Well, fantastic. So yeah, I'll keep using the Skin U and very excited about that one too. And glad that we got to highlight some of these points about PQQ. Do you have anything else you'd like to add at this point?
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this today. It's really exciting. It's nice to do it in this context. Yes. All right, Marko. Thank you so much again. Okay.
Anytime.
Bye-bye.
Bye.